In the flowing, muddy rivers of Texas, there's a certain species of dinosaur that anglers can have a chance to target. We're going to talk about them tonight and why they are both awesome and nowhere near as respected as they should be. Joining me is my buddy Ryan. We're going to talk about alligator gar.
Welcome to the Bait Tank, where if it's fishing, we'll talk about it. Whether it's gear, techniques, stories, or the health of our waterways, nothing's off the hook. So grab your rod, sit back, and let's dive in.
Hey, yo, welcome back to the Bait Tank. Today, we are talking about alligator gar fishing with my buddy Ryan. Ryan, welcome in, man. Tell us how you got started with this, man.
Okay. About 15 years ago, I realized I was 10 miles away from the Trinity, and the Trinity is probably the greatest fishery for alligator gar. I live here in Texas. I live in the heart of alligator gar country, and I ran with it. I mean, I found solace in it. I've dedicated 15 years to that fish.
That's some insane dedication. So obviously you have 15 years of just alligator gar fishing. Now I'm under the impression you have a social media channel out there. Would you want to talk about that? Kind of tell everybody who you are and where they can find this stuff.
Okay, so I used to have a YouTube. I don't anymore. I did delete it. I do have a TikTok and I do have an Instagram. I go under Outhouse Productions 1 on Instagram. I'm at 30,000 followers, and on TikTok I think about 61,000 followers under Outhouse Productions. There you can go and watch my videos, see what I catch. We regularly catch them anywhere from 5.5 to almost 8 foot. Had a couple 8-footers.
I will say I've seen some of the pictures of them. There's some gorgeous fish. And it's actually weird because we say it's a fish, right? But they don't look like a fish. I mean, yes, they have fins. Yes, they have gills. But these things look like armored tanks, man. They are insane. And obviously tons of teeth. And that's a concern for people. You know, back in the day, there was the rumors of alligator gar being big enough to swallow children that were swimming. You know, the fact that you're able to pursue these 8-foot fish. I mean, have you seen bigger ones and never landed them? Is 8 foot kind of like the biggest you've seen? I mean, what you got?
I'll be honest, I've seen some every bit of a 50-gallon drum wide, like in girth, and I have hooked into things. I have videos actually of hooking into things that were not 8 foot. They were much bigger. Could have been an alligator, but alligator, they typically kind of stay away from their lines out here. They're very picky, pretty much. I mean, unless you have like chicken legs, stuff like that, they're not going to go after like a carp head or a piece of carp like an alligator gar. I've hooked into some things that have destroyed some pin reels, man. I'm talking about making smoke.
That would be interesting to see your experience for sure. You guys don't use, I mean, we'll get into that a little more later, but I know you guys don't typically use like these small Walmart special reels, like you're using pens. They're like saltwater reels. They're huge, right? So, I know we'll touch more on that in a little bit, but yeah, it's just cool to think about. Like I said, it's a bucket list species for me to catch a big one. And it's just the idea of it. I see those videos all the time. You know, they're chucking baits, you know, as big as my head out there to catch these fish, and some of the muddiest water. I mean, you guys, I don't even know how some of y'all stand on some of those banks, man. Like you guys are out in waders and like the mud's deeper than the waders, and it's cool to watch for sure. It's definitely unlike anything we do here in Tennessee.
I'll be honest. Like you said, there are people that go out there with their waders and they'll be in that mud and whatnot. You're just getting everything else dirty, and if you get sucked down by that mud, because it's kind of like quicksand, honestly. I mean, it'll suck you down quicker than quick, and it's like endless. So I go barefoot. Sure. I've lost a bunch of area boots in that mud, so I was okay, barefoot it is. I'm out here. if I'm gonna sink, I'm gonna sink.
I got you. Well, so that leads me to another question. With you being barefoot, have you had any experiences of like getting injured because of that? And has it been a problem? Have you had any close calls?
Actually, it's funny you asked that. I am still currently recovering from my second ruptured Achilles. And it's from that
Okay,
mud,
all right.
man.
Yeah, I got you. Like you said, you just stuck in there. It doesn't truly surprise me, other than the fact that I just never would have thought about it. I guess because, like you said, it's just a vacuum, right? And you're just stuck in it. Uh, that's nuts. That. Thank you for sharing that for sure, because that's borderline. I guess it could be embarrassing, right? You know, I have all these followers, and yeah, now I hurt myself like a football player. You know.
Exactly. I mean, so I did the man method. Let me explain real quick. I
All
did the
right.
man method. I went about a month and a half without going to orthopedic.
Yep. Yep. Okay.
I made it so much worse than what it should have been.
Sure. No, I get that. The man method's a common method. There's a reason why it's called that. Yeah, for sure. I actually had a vague idea when you said that. I was like, he didn't go to the doctor. I in my head, I was like, that's where he's going. Because that's definitely something we do for sure. So obviously, talking about alligator gar fishing, you got into it for about 15 years. You've been dedicated to it for 15 years. But what got you into fishing in the first place?
Um, my dad definitely was a big factor in it. Here in Texas, we have a ton of like state parks. We didn't have like a ton of money. We're middle class family, on the lower end of a middle class family, and our vacations were state parks. And that's the funnest thing you could do at a state park is go fishing. So
I agree. I
there,
definitely
and
agree.
I moved my way up. I started buying my own gear. I started seeing their bigger, better fish here in Texas, and I grew an affinity to alligator gar.
Now, I will say it's funny you say that because you're in Texas. You've went further up and further up. They say everything's bigger in Texas. You're just literally following that path. That's pretty awesome. Um, what was your first alligator gar? Like, do you remember that one? I know you've caught several. So what was it? Was it? I assume it's a special fish, but was there anything in particular about it you remember?
I wasn't shocked that it was an alligator gar, but I was shocked that I got it without any leader or anything like that. I was using a circle hook. So, I mean, to me, that's pretty special. They tell you can't catch alligator gar on a circle hook. Yeah. I mean, it was a pretty special fish. He wasn't big by any means, probably 3 foot at max, 3 foot. But yeah, that was a special fish. That's what got me into it because I'd say I was using a medium pole, pretty much like a bass pole, and it fought like crazy, man.
How long was that fight on that light of gear?
I would say probably 3 to 5 minutes. And I also kind of horsed him in because I knew if I didn't horse him in, if I gave him a little play, he was going to sever that line.
Sure. Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, it's funny you say you use a circle hook because the only one I've ever caught was the same thing. I was catfishing and just happened to catch it. And honestly, they kind of from that fish, what I remember, they kind of hit light. It wasn't like a normal. It definitely wasn't like a normal catfish run. I thought maybe I had a small channel cat playing with it because it just would drag a little, stop, drag a little, stop, drag a little, stop, and that was it. Is that the case with bigger fish too?
Oh man, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's kind of how it is. I know with the bigger ones, you'll know when you have it because I use 5 ounce weights to leave my bait on the bottom. I don't use the floats. I'm very unconventional when it comes to alligator gar. Um, I do all bottom fishing, no float, nothing. Um, it's almost like the river will pick it up, and it's just a slow troll after that.
Okay.
And that's just how they are. But as soon as you hook it, it's like hooking a freight.
I can imagine, especially when you're pushing, like you said, 8 feet or bigger. I mean, or obviously every fish you lose or don't see is obviously way bigger than it is. But I'm assuming that if you didn't see it or if it was that big and you were worried about it, especially one with the size of a 55-gallon drum for a head, it probably was pushing closer to 10 foot. That's just a guess, but that's got to be a huge fish for sure. You mentioned leader, so let's go ahead and drift into the tackle side of things. Like what I know you don't recommend medium tackle, but that's what you call your first one on, but what is the recommended tackle for these big fish? Because obviously they're pushing several 100 pounds sometimes.
Oh yeah. So what I use is I use for seeker. This one that I use a lot. They have heavy cat rods and they're specifically made for like river fish and catfish, stuff like that. And people use them specifically for flatheads. And to me, flatheads and gar fight a lot alike. The only difference is gar being able to breathe the air and breathe in water. They typically don't get tired. So you have to have something that has a big backbone. I do use reaction tackle 150 line, braided line at that. And that works well. I make my own leaders actually. I use a single strand of 300-pound just haywire, and I do a haywire knot. I mean,
Okay.
I grew up with a stepdad who had a horse ranch, and I learned how to do haywires. So I use that. I use tiny hooks. You're gonna laugh. I use a 2-aught hook, and it's
I mean, no,
almost
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, I'm under the impression with any kind of gar fishing, long nose, short nose, spotted, whatever. Honestly, you want those small hooks because you want it to be further back, past the teeth, right? So, and back towards the eyes. My understanding is that you want it's a very small spot you're aiming for, so it makes sense. Especially with the smaller gar species, 2-aught might be a little small in my opinion. If you catch something that's that big, but I mean, at the same time, it doesn't surprise me. The concern would be though, how do you get that big of a bait on that small of a hook? Because I know some of them baits you throw are huge.
so I use a sewing needle. This is gonna sound funny. So I use a sewing needle. I take a piece of braid and I loop it through and tie it onto the hook. So it's barely off the hook. They can grab it. And like you said, you want them to swallow it. But the way I've learned with those tiny hooks is they have real soft tissue on the front of the mouth and near the tongue. That tiny hook will get right in there. So I use laser sharp Gamakatsu live bait hooks. And they're tiny, maybe the size of a dime, and they get right on that tongue almost 90% of the time. I can get in
That's
there.
awesome.
Yeah, I can get in there, dehook them real quick, boom, on their way.
That's pretty cool. And you bring up a good point. Obviously, these fish are old when they're that big, right? So they're already tired. They fight like crazy. I've seen those videos. They're tired. I'd be tired. That's for sure, right? And the being able to get them unhooked quickly and released back is a major factor with any kind of trophy fishing. But I would imagine something that big and that old, it'd probably be very important too. Speaking of baits around that subject, what is your typical go-to bait for these fish?
So I used to do a lot of bow fishing. I never shot gar. Any species never shot gar. I used to do a lot of bow fishing for carp and buffalo. Carp and buffalo are the go-to. I got out of bow fishing and I go and catch my own carp by rod and reel.
That's my
And
preferred way to catch them too. So that's another fish that fights hard for its size, right? So I mean, it's fun.
yeah,
But
I use ultralight, ultralight and 6-pound line. That's what I do. And man, they'll take you for your money.
sure. So when you're going after these carp and these buffalo, is there like a preferred size you're looking for
Um,
bait,
I'll
rather, I
be
should say?
honest. I'll be honest. Anything above 10 pounds, I throw back. To me, that's a breeder fish. So If it's right at 9 pounds, 9.9, I'll take it. But like I said, I'm unconventional when it comes to the car stuff. I always bring a Sawzall. All these other people will use like a hatchet, something like that. I use a Sawzall, man. Make it quick, easy, efficient.
Sure. Why not? I mean, yeah, I could see that be efficient for sure. I mean, because I've had a red horse sucker once, and it was frozen, and obviously that is much smaller than a gar. They're bony though. It was frozen. It would not thaw. It was just the right temperature outside. I was out there for like an hour waiting for it to thaw, and it wouldn't thaw. So yeah, I ended up taking a hatchet to it too. But man, you lose a lot of bait using a hatchet to cut those things. So yeah, I can imagine a Sawzall or a bone saw or something be a lot better for sure. And obviously, I don't know how many lines you fish with for alligator gar. I assume only one or two, depending on the body of water, because how much distance or how much space rather you need for fighting the fish. But if you're doing the catfish thing up here, we're allowed to use as many rods as we can throw. Usually I'm around 3 because I'm like beyond that, it's like I don't want to be tangling into myself nonstop. But yeah, I could see a Sawzall being effective, especially if you had multiple rods to do.
Oh yeah, yeah. My favorite size of carp to use is 3 to 5 pounds because typically I can get 3 to 5 pieces of bait. I use 1 pound baits, honestly. Like that's my
Sure,
thing.
yeah. Do you use the tail section just out of curiosity? I know it's a really random question, but it's just a theory in my head. Do you use tail sections for your baits?
I do. I have okay luck on it. Typically they like the head.
I see a lot of people throw heads in videos, so it doesn't surprise me. I just was curious. My theory is for some reason the tail end, I don't know if that's because, not to be too gross, but that's the butt end of the fish, so it's got all that other gunk down there. I don't know if it just tastes funny or what, but it seems like when I'm catfishing even, they don't touch the tail pieces hardly ever, unless they're just really hungry. So I don't, like I said, it's just a theory of mine. I have no idea if it actually has any kind of factual background to it or anything, but yeah, like I said, just curious. So you get 3 to 5 baits. Obviously, it's a head piece and then several body sections. When you do the body sections, are you using the whole entire slab, or do you like cut it at the spine to get 2 baits, or is there a preference there for you on that?
So I try to do so if it's a 5 pound carp, I will cut that midsection in pieces because I mean, if you do it with the Sawzall, both those pieces will keep everything intact instead of breaking it all up. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
It still has like the innards and everything, and that right there, that's really what they want. It leaves a trail, and if the gar aren't going to eat it, a big catfish will.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, any predatory fish smells blood's like dinner bell for sure. Obviously, we're talking about gar fishing. You prefer rod and reel. You said you never shot him as a bow fisherman. Do you have not necessarily a problem with people doing it? I'm assuming you do because obviously that kills the fish, you can't get it back. But is there a problem in Texas, I guess, with people shooting the big alligator gar with bow?
To me, yes. Even here in Texas, the stretch of river that I fish now, over off 287, where I put my boat in, they have special precautions. You can't keep or shoot anything over 48 inches. Anything over 48 inches and you're caught with it, it's like a $5,000 fine. It's big
Oh,
money.
wow.
And
Sure. Yeah.
they get serious. It's a protected species.
That's cool. Honestly, it's really cool. Because like I said, here, the alligator gar itself specifically is protected here, but all the other gar, unfortunately, are considered, you know, absolute garbage. We don't want them. I mean, they still have a major role in the ecology of the water and everything, and it's an important biomass here, obviously, and it's just not given the credit it's needed, unfortunately, in my opinion. But that's either near here or there. It's cool that Texas is actually taking that seriously, and with that being a rising sport, especially putting more emphasis on that, it's pretty cool. Now, on some of these videos I've watched people gar fishing, they use the what do they call them, the little lassos to land them. Do you use that yourself? or is that
I
just
do, man.
okay?
That
Do you
I
kind of
think
want you
that's
want to
my
explain that
favorite
process?
part.
Really? Okay. Is it because you're so close to the teeth and it's just so intense, or is it
Man,
something else
I
to it?
don't know. Oh, okay, I got a story for this too.
Sure.
So yeah, that's my favorite part. My thing is like with the lasso, I even have like a real deal lasso that you would use on cows and everything. And you get their head just barely out. You can get them, put that rope right around that, right where their gills are, and just snag them. And you got to do it quick because as soon as they feel that rope, they're off. So
Okay.
it's all just a timing thing. So you got to get them real quick. Um, so I donate trips to veterans every year, and I did
Nice.
about before I ruptured my Achilles this last time. That's where I was. I was doing a trip for veterans, and I'm not gonna lie, it's probably the biggest fish I've ever seen in my life. I didn't have my GoPro, nothing. I typically don't do that just to keep privacy of the people.
Sure.
But yeah, I was sitting there. This guy, he hooked into this fish, and like the river was still high, and with the Trinity, it's jacked up pretty much for them from them rerouting it. And we were at a break where it was clear water from like a creek, and then muddy water. And man, we were in my boat, and I was parked up on the side of the bank, and the way like my motor, like everything was set up in the back. The motor was about 18 inches above the back of the top of the boat. And this fish, like this guy couldn't get it on the side, nothing. I was like, hey, if you can get it on the side, I could get him real quick. We'll get it in. This could be a record fish. Thing was so heavy that he could not
Couldn't get it.
budge it. And this fish's
Man.
head was just sticking out. I was like, man, if I do this right now and he gets a wild hair, he's jumping up and getting me. I was like, let me go ahead and try it. And as soon as I put that lasso right around its nose, it sunk down. There was just enough like room between the bottom of the boat and the bank that it rubbed its nose and got that hook out.
Oh no.
Dude, I'm telling you, that head from the water to the like it was above my dang motor. It was
That's a
probably a
big
solid
that's a big fish.
28 inches of head. Just 28 inches of
Yeesh.
head.
Man, I can only imagine how you guys felt when that fish got away.
Oh
That would
man,
be
it was so, we had gotten skunked on gar all day. I got the guy on many, many catfish, but
right.
that was the only gar we got on. And he looked at me right after that thing got off and he was like, you know what? This was all worth it. He was like, this was worth it. And I understand why you're trying to save these fish now. He's like, that was intense. That was crazy.
Yeah, no, for sure. That sounds awesome, man. I'm looking forward to my chance to do that someday. Cause that yeah, the closest thing I have to get to that size now is they've been stocking sturgeon here in Tennessee, and they get to be, several 100 pounds and, up to 8 feet long. So that's the closest thing I got here to mess with. But they don't. I know they fight hard, but I know they don't fish the same. So yeah, I'm looking forward to my chance. I got some family in Texas. I may have to plan an extra trip down there just to go alligator gar fishing.
If What part of Texas?
They're in the Houston area.
I'm not too far for Houston. I can travel to you. I know the river well, but I
May have
can
to pick
shake
you up on that
you.
someday.
I
That
can
would
show
be
you.
that would be awesome, man. That would be awesome. Um, is there any other than the lasso thing? I know, like you said, you explained it goes behind the gill plate, and it's just because that's got the only indention really on them because they're tube shaped, right? Um, is there any other like tips or precautions you want to give people about trying to land those fish at that point, especially when they're that close?
When you get them in your arms, when you get them near your hands, they're scales. I have more scars on me from the scales than their teeth.
Okay, okay. Obviously, gloves, I guess, is the recommendation for that if you're worried about it.
I would say
If you're worried
yes.
about it. Okay.
If you're worried
I,
about it, yes, they can slice you up real quick and real good just with their scales aligned.
that's like I said, man, earlier. They're literally like armored trucks. It's a cool thing to look at for sure. Um, does the way you go after them change throughout the year, throughout the season? Is there like a certain condition that's better? Is there a certain condition where you're like, I don't plan on catching any today? Is it, I don't know. I guess what's the variances throughout the season?
So typically here where I live an hour south of Dallas in the middle of nowhere. That's where I am. I'm in the middle of nowhere country. My towns around me are all like 1,500 people or less.
Okay.
So I'm in a spot where nobody fishes for them, nobody goes after them, nobody shoots them. I mean, I have all that, but season pretty much starts beginning to mid spring, and they start running the river. So there's a gar run. That is
Okay.
typically my favorite time to go, but everyone wants to go in the summertime because that's when the big ones will sit in spots. And you can just map out, like with your fish finders, and map out areas where you've caught them before, and they'll stay pretty much in that same area.
Now, is that because of territorial, I
Mm-hmm.
guess? Okay. Gotcha. That's cool. Um, I guess also you said you fish for them on the bottom. I know a lot of people use the float fishing thing. Is there like a certain time of the year where the float fishing does better, or like do they change the water column part, or is that I don't know. I don't really know anything about that river. Is that river just kind of not that deep, or what?
All right, man. No, that river can get deep. Realistically, it's kind of just preference to the person. Gar are gonna go where the food is, and that's just how they
Sure.
are. So, to me, why would I put a 5, 10, $15 float on and lose a 5, 10, $15 float
Sure.
when I can throw my bottom bait out, catch them the same way, and possibly lose the fish because that river is full of trees, it's full of trash, it's full of a lot of things it shouldn't be full of. And
Man,
if
it's
it's
any
big
river seems
enough,
like.
oh yeah, oh yeah, if it's big
I
enough,
live
it's going to
on
try to wedge itself in a tree.
right. So like I said, depth wise, I live on the Tennessee River. We have holes that are like 100 feet deep. We have sections that are only like 30 feet deep. So like that, not to give away all your secrets for your spot, obviously, but in that major area you fish, what's the rough depth
Okay, so that
on
river can
average? I mean, like
get.
I said,
I've seen it up to 50. It doesn't get super deep, especially where I am. Word of mouth, just from me, you're gonna catch those fish in 4 foot, 5 foot of water.
I was gonna say I assume it was shallower just because of how I've seen the gar behave here, but I didn't know for sure. I didn't want to make that claim. As again, I'm not an expert. I'm just a weekend angler, and you're obviously the expert here when it comes to alligator gar fishing. You got the experience. Um, Now, obviously, you talk about that one story where there was the creek feeding in, it was clear water to muddy water. Do you find they do better in clear water, or the fishing's better for them in clear water, or is it better in muddy water?
I would say muddy water. The thing about the clear water is you can see them. They can definitely see you. I mean, they got some big old eyeballs. They're very much sight feeders. So once they get their eye on something, so how I explain gar are they're the nicer cousin of barracuda.
Okay, the nicer cousin, nicer, much bigger cousin.
They're the nicer, much bigger version of a barracuda. I mean, they're not going to come. There's never been a recorded attack of alligator gar. Um,
Wait, are you telling me that all those stories of kids getting swallowed by them is false? Man, I am so disappointed and shocked. See it on my face. It, so many of these bigger fish species have so many bad stories and so many crazy stories, and it's just like, really, guys, come on. But yeah, that makes sense if they're sight feeders that they prefer the muddier water. Although it's kind of weird if they're a sight feeder and they'd rather see in a spot they can only see 6 inches versus something they can see, possibly 10 feet. But at the same time, usually I guess the muddier water probably be the higher flow, and so they'd have more food going through that too. So it all kind of makes sense when you really think about it, I guess. But it is a little bit different. So you said throughout the season their feeding habits and whatnot don't really change. The approach doesn't change because you almost always bottom feed or bottom fish for them.
Yes, sir.
You said you use 1 pound baits, you use 5-ounce weights, and you use a tiny 2-aught hook. Now you did say you're using a hay wire, which for those who don't know, it's a metal leader. Is there a certain length you go for by that leader, or is it just like the last foot, 2 foot? I mean, what do you do?
I would say my sweet spot for them are about 12 inches to 18 inches. That's my sweet spot for the leaders, because if for some reason the fish is like super hungry and they do try to swallow it, there's enough of that leader that you can say you're not able to get the actual hook out, and that's where the small hook comes into play. If they're not able to get that hook out, you can also put your hand in there, and I know it sounds crazy. Put your hand in there, clip it as close to that hook, and cut with braid scissors, cut that bait off so it can digest that fish.
Oh, right, because you just tie it to the hook. I got you. That makes sense. For sure. No, that's cool. I would not have thought about that as a benefit to that, but yeah, that's definitely something that works. That makes sense. What is the biggest gar that you've weighed or measured personally that you've caught? I know you said you've caught a few 8-footers, but what is the biggest one that you could think of?
8.2. I caught one 8.2. I don't have a truck, so I can't transport an 8'2" fish in my Jeep. So
Sure, I got you. With that being said, I know you said in Texas that you said 48 and bigger is protected. So obviously there's smaller ones there, and you've caught smaller ones. You said so. Have you ever ate one?
yeah. I did want to try it once. My thing is, so with those smaller ones, you're going to find a lot more of the smaller ones. Sure, they're going to get big one day if you allow them, but I did take one that was about 2 foot. I will say it's a weirder fish because it's not going to come out with fillets. It's going to come out with like tenderloin.
I'm about to say I have seen that, and the guy I watched clean one use 10 snips. Was that something you had to use?
Yes. Well, I didn't use 10 snips. What was it?
Did you
Kinda
use
like
the
a
saw?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I mean, might
Straight
as well
down the
you have it already,
side.
right?
And yeah. And it was good.
It was
I'm not going to lie. It's one of the better tasting fish I've had. It's almost like alligator.
okay. So in indirectly, it's like chicken, because supposedly alligator tastes like chicken to most people. I didn't get that impression. I got it. I like alligator too, but I didn't compare it to chicken. I'm not really sure what I compared it to be honest with you.
Have you ever had frog legs?
I have. It's been a very long time.
It's
So
almost like
you think
frog legs.
a little bit chewier, just a little bit.
A little bit.
I got you. But did it have like a real gamey taste or a fishy taste with it, or is it just the textures like the frog legs? Okay, that's pretty cool actually. Then did you have any special way that you prepared it, or did you kind of just fry it? I mean, what'd you do?
So I did it a couple ways because, I mean, you got to think you're getting 2 tenderloins on both sides. It's not just one solid tenderloin. You get 2 on both sides, tubular meat. I smoked it. I have fried it in a pan. I baked it, and I can tell you right now, smoking it takes that like chewiness away. And
Sure, because it breaks all that down.
Yeah, it's almost like a tenderloin once you smoke it.
Gotcha. That's pretty cool. Now, you say that each side you get 2 tenderloins. How does that work? Is there like a special bone or something that prevents that? I mean, how does that work?
Mostly, I can just tell you, like, it's weird how it's set up. It's like a bone right in the center that splits it in half, pretty much. And
is it where the top dorsal fin is?
Yeah.
That bone? Okay. I mean, yeah, okay. Still, that sounds weird. The only other fish I could think of that has fillets that do something strange like that would be like walleye, where you do the zipper thing to get that extra set of bones out. You get 4 fillets instead of 2. So I didn't know if it was something like that or not. But no, if it's just a direct obstacle, you got to cut around it. Then yeah, there's your 4. Um, Let me think here. Is there, speaking of the eating part of it, is there any kind of misconceptions or myths about alligator gar meat that you can prove or disprove?
That's me.
For the meat, yeah. Specifically, like I said, just because we're talking about the eating part of it.
People are going to tell you it's bad meat, that it's a trash fish, and blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's very false. It's a very hearty meat. It's a very, very good meat if you know how to cook it. There's a lot of ways to prepare it. It's a very clean fish. I mean, you got to think it's eating fish. That's all it's going to eat. It's going to eat fish. And whatever else that falls in the river, it'll eat. I mean, I've thrown hogs in and come down to the river, see them munching on those hogs. So I mean, they're gonna do is eat meat, and they're not a nasty fish. They're actually a very flaky white meat.
Back to the, obviously the biggest one was 8-2. Was that the hardest fight you had with that one, or was there one that in particular that was a harder fight or more of a problematic experience?
Okay, I actually have a whole video on it. You know, when you're going for flatheads and stuff, you're gonna use Abu Garcia, right? Like an Abu
Sure.
Garcia ambassador. So I was using the Abu Garcia. I had like a 10-inch. It had died by then, but it was a 10-inch perch. I threw it out there, and this Abu Garcia was one of the old 70s. Like it had the import stamp, everything. This fish
Gotcha.
was, I think it was a 6'6". So it wasn't like super big, but it was still pushing like 200 pounds. I
Yeah.
say 6'6" is not big for a fish, but yeah.
It's bigger than I am tall, but whatever, it's tiny fish.
I throw it out there. The river's still kind of high. And when that river's high, the water runs and there's like an undertow, everything like that.
Okay.
So I'm sitting there and I hook into this fish expecting like a 40, 50 pound flathead. Now I have a 200-pound gar. I have the video, everything. And it gets to a point where I have to tighten the drag all the way up and it's still just peeling drag. I can't make
No
any
gaining
like
ground, huh?
progress. And he's just running down river. And at one point, because it was a level wind, so I was using my thumb to stop it. And my thumb ended up bleeding because it just kept running and running. And I was like, man, this is terrible.
Sure.
It was
So
a good 45-minute fight.
I was about to ask how long it was for sure. I assume that's one of your longer fights then, since you were under geared.
Yeah, I would say yeah. I think the longest fight, my first, I say 8 foot. It was 7'11" and like 3/4. That's 8 foot to me. But
Sure, yeah.
my first 8 foot, I was by myself. I was using a pin fierce. Uh, it was like the pin fierce 2. So this was like 5, 6 years ago. Um, river was low, but this thing, like he snuck himself into a log, and like I had to wait for him to get out. He was
Okay.
hooked, everything. I let him like get out and everything. Once he did, he ran back up river, down river, back up. Like he just took me for a ride on my surf rod,
I got
and
you.
it was probably the scariest thing I ever did. There were gators everywhere. I had to go out because he got stuck on a sandbar. He was so big, he got stuck on the sandbar.
That's nuts.
Yes. I had to jump in the water and just go put him back in. But yeah, he was 7'11", 3/4, probably 280, 300.
Man, that's that's insane. To watch a fish you're fighting just all of a sudden beach itself, that's got to be weird. That's definitely got to be weird. Now you said you
I've
fish
seen
one
some
from a.
crazy. Hell,
You said you fish. You said you fish one from a boat too. How big's your boat?
the one I used to have was 18, and it was 18 by 6.5 foot. So it
Okay.
was a pretty nice sized boat. It was a good flat bottom.
Yeah.
I actually had to sell it because my Achilles, I was preparing for surgery, and they were just like, "Yeah, you don't need it. Just
Just kidding.
heal it on your own."
I
So
got you.
I'm waiting to get another one eventually, but
Sure. That's gonna be a little bit heartbreaking. If that was your boat, that was your tool, and now it's gone.
I mean, my thing is what I did from the boat, I can do from land. So I mean, it doesn't necessarily like take away from anything for me other than like my
Okay.
donated trips and stuff. But
I got you. Just because not everybody else wants to walk that far. I got it. I definitely get it. Um. So speaking of being under geared or almost bleeding out because your thumb was bleeding from hiding on braid, did you ever have any stories of like gear breaking or snapping or anything? How much have you lost gear wise to these fish?
okay, um, that's where like partnerships and everything come into handy. Before the partnerships, I was using specifically pin. That's what I used. Uh, I have probably ran through, and this is just a guesstimate, $3,000 of gear.
Jeez.
That's like I go to hook a fish and it snaps the bell on like a spinning reel, snaps the
Oh, okay.
bell.
Yeah.
Um, so there's that. A lot of other stuff. Yeah, $3,000 worth pin gear for sure. Now with my partnerships, anytime anything busts, I get it for free, like a free like lifetime warranty. They'll replace it.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah,
Now, if you want, do you have a? I guess for anybody out there listening who's interested in doing this, do you have any kind of coupon code or anything you want to share?
you dang. Once I just signed another contract. Once they
Yeah, I don't
email
know how
me
that
my
works. If you're not allowed, if I got you. Well, yeah, no, go ahead and send it to when you get it. I'll put it in the description. If anybody's interested in that his coupon code for the gear, which I'll explain in a minute, will be in the description. Yeah, you guys can get it. So who is your partnership with?
so the main one right now is Whisker Seeker. With them you can get all your catfish gear. To me, I am the only person they have signed for like Alligator Gar. Their gear works for Gar. So it's kind of like Mad Cats, but they've been out a lot longer than like Mad Cats and all of them. And I
So
took some.
I got a little bit of everything. So I definitely have some Whisker Seeker stuff. I like it a lot. And I have some Mad Cat stuff, and I have a couple other oddball stuff too. But yeah, I tend to use the Whisker Seeker stuff a lot just for more general purpose fishing, as well because it's flexible. You know, it's a reasonably soft tip, still has a backbone like you said. So yeah, I'm not surprised at all that it works for Gar.
I will say, if you're interested in the floats, they have probably the best float there is, in my opinion, because they have them that are like 12 inches long and can hold like 5 ounce weight or even bigger than that. And those things, they're complete foam, they're huge, they're red, they're really good floats, man.
I
And
know.
this is coming from a non-float fisherman. I've used them before, and
Sure. Well, yeah. Well, and like you said, though, if you're possibly going to break the fish or break a fish off, and you're assuming you're probably going to, if you have, say you catch 5 fish, I'm guessing you're assuming you're going to lose 2. Uh, that gets expensive quick when you have a $10 or $15 float on there for sure. And it's just like any other kind of, those guys that throw those big glide baits for bass and they get smacked by a muskie or something and lose it. I'm like, that just looks like it hurts the wallet at $65 a piece or whatever they pay for those things. Some people, man, I can't understand it. But obviously for you, having a partnership makes that easier, I'm sure. But not everybody out there is going to have that. So, but yeah, like I said, I will put his coupon code in the description for you guys. No matter if you're watching the video or the audio version of this, that way you guys can have access to it if you want. Um, so yeah, that's awesome, man. I'm thank you for sharing that. And like I said, when you get that coupon code sent to me, I would happily put it in there. Um, is there any other like misconceptions about alligator gar that maybe you want to kind of clear up or talk about, or anything maybe we haven't covered that you want to share?
They're quite possibly the most docile fish I've ever handled. I mean, I'm more terrified of a largemouth bass with a lure in its mouth popping out of the water and getting me than handling an alligator gar any day of the week. And that's any alligator gar from small to large. That's just me in general.
Now, is that pre or post lasso? The docile part, because you said they kind of take off when you put the lasso back on.
Yeah. So they get like a second, third, fourth wind, and
Uh-huh.
like you can get them up to the boat, but they'll look at you and they're like, "Oh no, I'm not done," and they'll turn on a dime and go. So you got to try to tire them out, or if you can't, got to move as quick as possible. But post lasso, you can take that lasso off once you get in, say, knee deep water if it's a big enough car, and you can't pick it up. You can put it in your arms, and that thing's not going to do anything. I think the worst thing it can do is just slap you with its tail. I've been slapped by the tail billions of times. Doesn't feel good, but that's about
Sure.
it. They're not gonna try to like head rash you, try to bite you, nothing. Super docile fish. Most times they'll just sit there and just breathe the air. Their mouth is just opening and closing. That's it.
Again, debunking the myth of alligator gar swallowing children. Uh, that's pretty crazy thinking about something that big. And it's like, you probably would like crush me if I let it drop on me, right? But it's not even gonna do anything. It's just gonna lay there. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, think about it like this. Anybody that gets in, okay, let's use Texas for example. So during the wintertime, the gar run like super thick down in Galveston. That's where they go. So they do their run down to Galveston. They're in the bay. That's where they go. And that's why, like, if you pull up fish brain during the wintertime, you'll see a lot of people catching gar because the water doesn't get like super cold like it does up where I live. But you
now when you
never
say the
know if
bay, is that brackish water or is it still fresh water in that bay? I'm not
oh,
familiar with Galveston off the top of my head. So
so right there, it's technically brackish water. Out in Galveston, you're out there with nobody really like talks about it, but you're out there with bull sharks, you're out there with all kinds of sharks, but you're also out there with the gator and alligator. Because the gators will
I
sit
got
there
you.
and surf all the way out, like miles out, and then come back in with the waves. But
I got you.
you can go 5 miles out into actual saltwater, and the gar will be in there.
Hmm. That's pretty cool.
They can live
I
in
knew that,
saltwater.
but I knew they had some salinity tolerance, but like I didn't know to what extent. But if they're actually
Pretty
out there
good, man.
thriving, it's pretty crazy. Yeah. Um. With that being said, so that's the winter run. Yes, they're going to warmer water. They're just chilling out for the winter. Are the big ones still being caught at that point? I know you mentioned summer is kind of when everybody catches the big ones. So what you're saying basically is either winter in Galveston or summer up in the river is the two spots to go if you're gonna go for big one.
Anywhere
And
from like Houston down to Galveston is the best winter time, but anything south of Dallas in the middle of nowhere to me is the best because super depopulated. There's not enough people to actually like worry about the population. You just got to know what you're doing and know where you're going.
a lot less pressure, sure. Uh, if uh, if somebody was to go down there, what would, in your opinion, be the likelihood, like percentage wise, that they would catch a, I don't know, say a 5 or 6 footer? I know 8 footers are huge, and obviously you said the smaller ones are fairly common. Is it a decent chance? Is it a mediocre chance to catch a 6 footer?
If okay, um, if people will reach out to me, I can give them all the pointers possible. It's a pretty decent chance, yes. I will be honest, the percentage of them actually landing or hooking the fish is not very high. They're smart.
Now, okay, I'm about to say, is it because of the intelligence thing, or is it because of other factors? Because I assume, like you said, there's a fleshy part of their tongue. That's where you use the smaller hooks to try to get in there. But if they're using a bigger hook, or say you're hooking into the jaw, I'm assuming that's really bony. So
So
that's where the issues on the hook set arise, right?
yes and no. So the funny thing about guard, I know you've seen the videos and you see the people letting them run up, down, like all over the river, right? So what they're doing whenever they're running, they're chewing on that bait just to see if there's something in it that they don't like. And that's why sometimes when they're running upriver, they will drop that bait and never come back. They're smart, man.
That
They
would
can
that
feel.
would
They
that
can
would be
feel a
heartbreaking.
point. Yeah, they do it a
So
lot
again,
too.
that's where your smaller hook comes into play for your increased chance in yourself. Yeah, for sure. Uh, Now, do you have to hook set like some of those guys do on the videos? I mean, those guys are literally like cranking down and like I feel like they're breaking their spine more than they're setting the fish into the hook or hooking to the fish because how hard they're swinging back. Do you have to swing back that hard to set the hook? In your experience,
Depending on the hook size, yes. Depending on the hook size, very much so. With the smaller hook, I can just like a catfish. I mean, I typically don't use circle hooks. With catfish, I can do just a regular hook set. Um, with a smaller hook on gar, I can do about the same. And most times, like I said, it gets that real soft piece, like the tongue and everything. It'll get caught up in that. But with the bigger hooks, you kind of gotta like time it just right and let them run maybe 20, 30 yards. Because sometimes they can run hundreds of yards, man. I'm not even lying. They'll run hundreds of yards. But 20, 30 yards, you can let them run and you gotta set that hook because if you try to go through the nose or the jaw, you're pretty much gonna have to break bone to get it in there.
I
And
got you.
that's another reason why I don't do it because like it's not good for the fish. You break that jaw, they're not gonna heal right and I don't think kill the fish.
I have a confession to make. It wasn't with the gar; it was the bowfin. I was not prepared to catch one in a kayak. I was definitely not prepared to catch one in a kayak at night. Didn't have a net. All I had was a pair of pliers. Yeah, I broke that fish's jaw. Now, I didn't break it entirely, so I assume it would be okay, but I've always felt guilty about it. But I did break a chunk of his jaw off, and I felt guilty. So yeah, I can understand the concern, the desire not to want to do that, because it's in the back of my head. It's like, man, that fish is probably still not eating right. So I get it.
Wait,
I definitely
uh,
get it.
okay. I'm gonna show you something. Nobody's seen this. Let me see if I can't find it. So I actually documented one of the only gar to ever have a deformation. Wasn't a big one, but he was
Okay,
thriving. He was still eating. I caught him. But he had a
you're getting the
deformation.
inside scoop, guys.
He had a hooked nose.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's different.
Oh man, I gotta find it real quick. But yeah, he had a hooked nose. Super cool fish. He was like he was like the Bubba Gump of gar, man. Like he just it was so weird. So
Yeah,
I
no, I
don't know
got you.
how it happened, but he's he's somewhere. He was living his best life. I made sure to get that hook out, and
Now you said he wasn't super big, but how big was he?
I think it was 3 foot. So that was a 5 year old fish, 3 to 5 year old fish.
I guess while you're still looking for it, you want to explain, I guess, how long on average it takes for those bigger fish to get to that size?
Okay, so once they hit a plateau in like growth at about 5.5 foot. They can get to that length in I think it's 8 to 10 years, and after that, they grow more like girth they'll grow more girth than they do like lengthwise over the years. The fish that are anywhere from 7 to 8 foot or 70 to 80 years.
That's insane. You truly are fishing for dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm. Things that have been alive in for everything, pretty much.
Right.
Oh, here he is. Hold on. Because, but hold on.
For those watching the audio podcast, I'm sorry. We'll post a clip on the other stuff to show. Dude, that is wicked looking.
You see his underbite and everything?
Yeah, that's nuts.
I got a video too. He wasn't big. He was, now that I look at it, he was more like 3.5, 4 foot. Here's a better picture. Yep.
That's crazy, man. That is crazy. Must say that definitely upturned. I've seen enough pictures of alligator gar to know it's supposed to be straight.
Yeah, I was confused. I was like, man, this guy, he's lived. Keep him alive.
Right? No, for sure. Like I said, we'll post a clip of that on the social media channels for you guys to be able to see that too. Or if he ever shares on his, you can check it out. I know he said he didn't show a lot of people about it, but it's still pretty cool. So when you documented that fish, did you call the state, or is it just like a personal documentation, or what'd you do?
So it was more of a personal documentation. I looked up like alligator gar deformations. Never been documented. Nobody's got any kind of pictures of a deformation, anything like that. So I mean, I looked up on Google, I looked on Bing, like everything, and it's your typical alligator gar, but that guy's like the first of his kind.
That's pretty cool. And that's something you'll be able to hang on to for forever. That's awesome, man.
Those and hybrids, hybrid alligator gar are the coolest things.
What's a hybrid alligator gar? I haven't heard of that one yet.
You've never heard of one?
No, I've never heard of one. What is a hybrid alligator gar?
Okay, so a hybrid alligator gar is it's a hybrid between a gator gar and a longnose gar. And so down here we call them crocodile gars, and they have a skinnier nose than an alligator gar. So their bodies and like the start of their head will look like an alligator gar, but it gets a little thinner.
Okay. Okay. No, I've never seen one. Never heard of that. That's pretty cool. Do they get as big?
Man, they get huge too. So they get the growth and everything from the alligator gar, but they just have this weird nose. I have a picture. Let me see. I have a picture of the one that was actually on Barstool Sports. Let's see.
What is Barstool Sports, for those who don't know?
Barstool Sports is the sports side of or Barstool Outdoors, actually. It's the outdoor side of Barstool. And with Barstool, yeah. Maybe see how much skinnier that nose is?
Yeah. So actually, now I'm thinking about it, I have seen it, I guess, and maybe it's a misidentified fish because I swear I've seen some of the head skinnier noses like that and didn't really think about it possibly being a crossbreed.
Right. Yeah, it's a 6-foot fish with a much skinnier nose than what a 6-foot fish should have.
But like you said, the back of its head looks like an alligator gar, but it quickly goes down. Because the alligator gar definitely is more triangular, whereas that one's definitely more curved in. That's pretty crazy. That's insane, man.
2 in my life, and probably will never catch another, honestly. That's how rare they are. It's kind of weird. So you've caught longnose gar, right? You know how they're very acrobatic. They're very, very acrobatic, very fast. And that's what they are, man. Acrobatic, fast. They're jumping all out of water.
Unlike a regular alligator gar, which kind of just, like you said, is like a flat head. I assume when you say that, I assume it stays down and doesn't come up. So, yeah, that's good to know, man. I've learned just as much from filming these and talking to these people as you guys get from us. Just to be perfectly clear, I learned so much. This is awesome, and I I really do appreciate it. Is there anything else that you want to talk about or add about the alligator gar that people may or may not know?
One last thing, I got a fun fact. So back when the Native Americans lived here in Texas, throughout the United States, they used alligator gar skin as armor.
Okay,
As
makes
actual
sense.
armor.
Now I'm curious how. I assume based on the shape and having to use a sawzall or a tin snip to cut it. I don't know how would you fasten that? I mean, how would you?
I don't know,
I don't know how.
man. I
I don't know how.
I've gone to different like museums and stuff, and they have like actual Kevlar made from alligator gar.
That's pretty crazy. I wouldn't have thought about that, but I mean, it makes sense. Why not? Uh, that is different. That is definitely different.
It's how tough they are, man.
Sure, and the fact that they live in like some of the dirtiest water you can find, right?
Yeah,
They
they do.
get to be huge. They have all these teeth. They're a highly misunderstood fish, I feel like.
Most
Because
misunderstood.
how many other species, I can't think of any off the top of my head that get that big or even close that big that prefer those conditions. Like it's very unique as well. Like your big blue catfish, your big flathead catfish, generally speaking, they're going to be in cleaner water. They're only pushing 100 pounds, maybe 200 pounds. Like I say 200 pounds. Other people are like, oh, there's no 200-pound catfish out there. Well, that's not true. The state record in Tennessee is 123 on rod and reel. It's 180 by commercial net. So there's definitely some almost 200-pound catfish out there too. But they definitely different types of situation, different type of water. And thinking about fishing in a mud puddle and catching an 8-foot fish is kind of cool, for sure.
It's definitely pretty intense. The closer you get, obviously, down to like Galveston, Houston, you got your choice between bull sharks and gator gar. And the bull sharks they love that dirty water like that, though, man.
But that's the same thing as before. It's more of a, I guess you're more protected, I guess, like you said. That's still pretty crazy. Before we end this, do you want to go ahead and shout out your Instagram and your TikTok again for everybody out there that wants to check these videos out and watch you catch these things?
Yes, sir. Instagram is Outhouse Productions 1, and TikTok is Outhouse Productions.
That's awesome, man. Well, Brian, I greatly appreciate you coming up here with us tonight and talking about these awesome fish. It's, like I said, it's a bucket list species of mine. I've caught one. I've only ever caught one, but I'm looking for that 6 or 7 footer. Catching a fish as tall as I am would be insane and really cool. I may have to take you up on that offer sometime and give you a call when I come down to Texas again and see if we can make that happen. That would be cool.
Man, offer's always open. You just hit me up on Facebook or something.
Will do. And for all you listeners out there, if you want any more information, you can always message us at thebaittank@yahoo.com. You can always hit him up on his TikTok and his Instagram. His not coupon code, his discount code is going to be in the description for you guys once I get it. Hope you guys learned some stuff. Really appreciate you guys all tuning in. If you're enjoying the show, want to support the show a little more, we do have a Patreon going now for it. Nothing too crazy. I think it's like $3 a month for the first subscription. Would love to have you guys on board if you want to do that. Until next time, my name's Anthony. Ryan, thank you. And we'll see y'all next time on the Bait Tank Podcast.